Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we are diving into something that is genuinely eerie. We're looking at a global pattern that somehow connects historical tragedy, visceral true crime, and supernatural folklore. It's an absolutely fascinating look at how one seemingly random room number has somehow become a total magnet for the macabre across totally different cultures and continents. To kick things off, listen to this chilling quote from the science fiction thriller novel Obsidian Glass. It reads, "The apex is not a hotel, it is a vault." Now, in the book, the walls of this brutalist hotel are literally built with conductive concrete that records the emotional residue of its guests. It says a hauntingly brutal tone for our investigation today, right? It really introduces this creepy idea that physical spaces might actually trap human trauma.
Now hold that fictional horror in your mind for a second and contrast it with this real-life quote from an actual 1954 news report. It details the tragic plunge of a 55-year-old woman named Helen Gurney from a hotel window in Los Angeles. The clinical police report notes, she had registered as Margaret Brown of Denver when she checked into room 704 a week ago. And that hotel? That was the infamous Hotel Cecil.
So, what's the single common denominator tying all these dark events together? It's the number 704. From fictional cyber thrillers to very real, very grim police reports, this specific room number just keeps popping up as a focal point for tragedy and mystery. It's kind of wild once you start noticing it. And this isn't just an isolated thing, it literally spans the globe. We're talking Los Angeles, Mumbai, Baguio City, and Buenos Aires. Settings that range from budget hotels to university dorms and even residential flats. And the room number in every single one of these cases? Yep, 704. It really begs the question, is this just a massive statistical coincidence, or is there something much darker at play here? Section 1. Lorca's Historic Room 704. Let's actually wind the clock back a bit. In 1933, the celebrated Spanish poet Federico Garcia Lorca checked into room 704 at the Hotel Castelar in Buenos Aires. This was for what would become a highly successful 6-month stay. I mean, he was treated like an absolute celebrity. But the timeline that followed him was undeniably tragic. Just 2 years later, in 1935, his close friend, the legendary tango singer Carlos Gardel, who Lorca actually spent a ton of time with during that trip, died in a horrific plane crash. And then just a year after that, in 1936, Lorca himself was assassinated by a firing squad in Spain.
Here's the truly wild part. While room 704 at the Hotel Castelar is beautifully preserved today as a museum to honor the poet, it is still shrouded in historical mystery. You see, during his stay, Lorca's voice was apparently broadcast on Radio Stentor, which was located right there in the hotel building. But to this day, no recording has ever been found. Biographers claim that if it ever surfaced, it would literally be $1 million cultural artifact. It's like the room is holding tightly onto its secrets.
Section 2. True Crime in 704. Moving over to the infamous Hotel Cecil in Los Angeles. It opened in 1924 and, chillingly, quickly became known as the Suicide by its long-term residents. For our investigation, the timeline really peaks in 1954, when, as we mentioned earlier, Helen Gurney tragically leaped to her death specifically from room 704. Of course, the Cecil's grim reputation continued for decades, culminating in 2013 with the highly publicized and deeply unsettling discovery of tourist Elisa Lam in the rooftop water tank. But you know, this unsettling pattern doesn't stop in America. Take a look at a clinical Baguio City scene of crime operations report from the Philippines. It meticulously details the tragic hanging of a university student named Amber Martin. She was discovered with no signs of struggle, a suicide note on the floor, and another in her pocket. The location of the incident? Room A704 of her university building. It's just another grim tragedy adding heavy weight to this whole pattern. And then we have the deeply disturbing Mura Road case in Mumbai, which further highlights this brutal reality. 32-year-old Saraswati Vaidya was murdered in her 7th-floor apartment, specifically flat 704. Her body was dismembered by her live-in partner using a tree cutter, and parts were shockingly boiled in a pressure cooker to dispose of the evidence. It is a profoundly disturbing criminal event, and once again, it's securely anchored to those exact same digits.
Now, shifting to a different type of crime entirely, an Ahmedabad case shows us that danger in room 704 isn't always lethal. Sometimes it's just highly malicious. A man met someone through a dating app, and they booked a room at the Apex Hotel, room 704. When he stepped out of the bath, his date and an accomplice, both of whom were transgender women posing to extort him, stole 34,000 rupees worth of cash and valuables and threatened him with a false case. It's a stark reminder of the sheer variety of dark events tied to this space.
Section 3. 704 in Fiction and Folklore.
You've probably noticed how real-life horrors inevitably bleed into the fiction and online urban legends we create. Reality often directly mirrors fiction, right? The notorious real-life Hotel Cecile, with its absolutely macabre history of suicides and serial killers, bears a striking resemblance to the fictional Apex Hotel from the thriller Obsidian Glass. Remember that quote from the beginning? The fictional Apex uses conductive concrete to physically record the emotional residue of its guests. It is literally art imitating a very dark, very real reality.
And no surprise here, what room is at the dead center of the Obsidian Glass mystery? Yep, room 704. In the novel, a tech visionary and an artist are trapped in an infinite high-fidelity digital murder-suicide loop within this exact room. The investigating journalist finds the air charged with static, mirrors holding reflections that shouldn't exist. It directly and powerfully reflects our own real-world anxieties about trauma, leaving a permanent stain on a physical space. Online folklore taps right into this exact same dread, too. Take this incredibly popular Hindi YouTube ghost story. It starts with a lonely man moving into a new apartment, and he starts communicating with a girl through a small hole he accidentally made in his wall. After months of bonding with her, he discovers her flat is totally abandoned. She's actually a ghost. Driven to save her, he ends up engaging a tantric to perform a highly dangerous time travel ritual. It all culminates in this wild climax where the protagonist uses a demonic portal to travel exactly 70 years into the past. He goes back to the very village that used to stand where his modern apartment is now, all to rescue her soul from a black magic fire sacrifice orchestrated by her own family. It perfectly distills real-world anxiety, isolation, and history into a really eerie campfire tale. And where does it take place? Right there in Flat 704.
Section 4. Coincidence or curse? Okay, so how on earth do we make sense of this escalating, terrifying recurrence across both fact and fiction? Are we looking at a legitimate curse, or is this just human psychology playing tricks on us? To make sense of this, it's absolutely crucial to understand the frequency illusion, also known as the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. This is a cognitive bias where, after you notice something for the first time, your brain actively starts seeking out patterns, making you notice it much, much more often. Once you lock onto the number 704, your brain suddenly highlights it everywhere, making it feel like a supernatural pattern, when in reality, it's just psychology.
But looking at the sheer amount of data we just went through, we really have to ask ourselves, are these just statistical anomalies magnified by our own cognitive biases, or does our folklore mirror a genuinely dark reality? When you have a gruesome true crime in Mumbai, an extortion in Ahmedabad, an unsolved death in Baguio City, and a hunting history in Buenos Aires, all tied to the exact same digits, does the sheer concentration of violence and tragedy give this number a genuine dark resonance?
Ultimately, understanding the sources behind these stories gives us profound insight into how we, as humans, process tragedy, memory, and physical space. But, I gotta admit, it leaves us with a lingering thought. A thought that might just make you hesitate the next time you're walking down a long, quiet, dimly lit hallway. Will you ever look at a hotel room door the same way again? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, stay curious, and I'll catch you next time.